And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odysseys and Researchers Reports. Happy New Year. It is a brand new year, 2020. We really hope everybody's going to have a good one. Got a great show for you tonight. With me, as always, producer and co-host of the report, Miss Daniela Aiolo. How are you, Daniela?
I'm good, thank you. Happy New Year.
Lovely, as always. And our guest for this evening, a man that needs a little introduction. If you don't know who he is, you probably had your head under a rock for a while. Mr. Scott Carpenter. Welcome, Scott. It's good to have you back, buddy.
Thank you. It's great. It's great to be back. Thanks.
Well, I'll tell you, I whenever I had my experience and I went directly to looking online for Bigfoot stuff, just trying to validate, you were really the first one that I resonated with because you were actually showing something. It's no matter what anybody says about it, people have their own idea of the way this thing is supposed to look, and it just does not that way. If you ever see one, you're probably going to question whether it's a person. I did anyway. And some of the things that I saw that you were putting out, and I mean, this was 11 years ago, so you were really one of the first influences, with some of the first validation that I actually got that these creatures are actually real. So I kind of owe a little bit to you there on that. But we were talking on the phone the other day, and I kind of want to get everybody into who you are. Who were you before Bigfoot, and what happened to kind of get you interested in this?
Well, I was just a regular Joe. I mean, I was like everybody else going through life. I was mid 40s, before, and I was just I had a good job and had a family. I hunted, fished, camped, and just kind of went along. I mean, I wasn't like a conspiracy nut, but I did like I liked a good UFO story, or I like to watch In Search of back in the day, and then some of the other shows I was always that sort of thing. But Bigfoot really wasn't on my radar as far as any really major interest, other than if a Bigfoot show came on TV or some special, I'd watch it, and think about that, and that's interesting. And I'd had that childhood deal, where I'd seen the two small ones I'd kind of put that behind me, and just it was moving on, so to speak. So I was just your average guy. I wasn't like I said, I was just living here in East Tennessee and enjoying the outdoors and enjoying my life.
Ever any inkling at all, anything weird that you could look back on and say, that might have been them?
I did have two times when hunting back in the 90s. I had two things happen, and in two incidences. One of them was a muddy foot. Where we hunted, we would pull into an old strip mine, reclaimed strip mine, and so there's that old gray dust everywhere. And we had come back to camp. We just had campers on the back of our pickups, and we just form a semicircle or a circle and put the fire in the middle, and we were camped. That's kind of how we did it back then. And we come back from a day of hunting, and there was a huge muddy handprint on the side of my camper window. And of course, it kind of looked odd because it didn't look like a bear paw. Bears were rare and still are in that area. Of course, my father-in-law at the time's like, "Oh, that's just a bear." And I got home, I even had my wife and children come out and look at that because it was just such a huge, almost perfect, human foot handprints. It was like, way too large. And of course, we always looked at it, didn't even take a picture of it. With that's weird, that's odd. And then I washed the truck. And in the same area, about 2 years later, I was going in by myself, and basically I would climb the side of the mountain, go up a trail, and then I would go out an old logging road, probably about a mile to where my stand area was. And it's about 2 hours before daylight. And to my right hand side was a very steep ridge line. And then to my left, it was flat out to where it dropped off into the strip pit. And so I was just walking along. There was enough moon that I really didn't need much. Every now and then I'd turn on my flashlight, but I could follow the dirt road. And all of a sudden I started hearing what sounded like somebody walking on the hilltop beside me. The leaves were real crisp. And so, it's about 100 yards up, but you could hear like somebody walking along the ridge line above me. And at first I thought, the deer that I was going to hunt were going to beat me and get across in front of me. But then it was just one bipedal step, and it was weird, And so I stopped walking and listened. And when I stopped walking, then whatever was on the hillside stopped walking. And I listened for a second, then I started walking again. When I started walking, it started walking. So this went on 2 or 3 times. And then, so, I was kind of getting, I was thinking I had another hunter up there, somebody going to my location or something. So I kind of sped up, it sped up, and I stopped, abruptly. And then whatever it was took like 1 or 2 more steps. And at that point I turned and I yelled, I said, "I've got you. I know you're up there. Flash your flashlight." I was flashing my flashlight. I said, it's fine if you're going to hunt up here, but let's don't play games. And after I did all that and find my flashlight, there was nothing, literally nothing. And so I probably stood there 5 minutes or so waiting. And then I started walking again. And of course that was it. There was silence. And I wasn't there too far from my stand, and I'd already hung it, the week before. And this part of the mountains, a bench area, I mean, is usually just, there's, you see all kinds of wildlife running through it, squirrels and, you could, all kinds of stuff, birds. And it was really creepy because whatever had followed me was obviously close enough to watch me. And I mean, there was nothing. It was dead silent. There was no movement in the woods, no squirrels, no nothing. And in fact, after about 10 o'clock, I was just like, I don't know what's going on here, but this something ain't right. So I just came down and left. So that was probably like 99, 2000 when that happened. And so, but that, until I started in 2009, that was about it. And it probably most likely was a Sasquatch up there, following me. But I didn't, at that point, I just really didn't. I never just put it together. To me, it was just an odd, weird thing that happened.
Well, you don't have any reason to put it together.
You
don't have a frame of reference. It's not a part of your paradigm. You're told your entire life that this thing isn't real, that it doesn't exist. So it doesn't fit into your world, your view. So everything you hear, all those strange things, those bizarre things, it's always something else.
Yeah.
And until you are aware, and then, wow, it comes pouring back on you. So what happened to get you to start looking for these beings?
Well, it was in 2009 in the spring. I was fishing on a lake, not too far from my house. And I was off of a recreation area. I think it's about 1,500 acres. It's on Tellico Lake. I don't care if people know where it's at. And I had my job at the time. I was in like a little site office away from the main offices, and I was basically by myself. So during lunch hour, I didn't have anybody to talk to, and I had started watching videos. And some of the videos I'd started watching were some of these Bigfoot research videos where these people were running around whooping and all this stuff. And to be honest with you, I thought they were silly, and I thought it was funny. And so I would watch it for that content more than anything else. Some of these people running around, and I won't name names, but I thought, these people are lunatics, But it was funny, I was watching, and everything was a Bigfoot, and every X was caused by Bigfoot and whatever. But I don't know what got into me, but it was one of those mornings where the water was crystal, just like glass. It was a beautiful morning. I was throwing top water, and it's probably, I guess, about an hour after daylight. Where I'm fishing, there was actually one of those real nice subdivisions on the lake behind me, and but I'm fishing, and I don't know what came over me. He was being silly, and I did 3 or 4 whoops. Like I'd heard on, and they were bad ones, but I just did 3 or 4 whoops and thought to myself, of course, it just echoed. You can imagine on the lake, that quiet, you could hear it. It seemed to echo for 10 minutes, and I thought, oh gosh, I hope nobody was hearing me from that subdivision. They'll think I'm a nut. And so, I did that whoop, and I guess a couple minutes later, I started hearing something, far off, but it was coming towards me, crashing. You just hear, just something just, crashing through the underbrush. And I'm kind of like, oh, that's weird, because I was fishing a point, and it's just full of briars, and it's real thick, and even though I know that people can ride their horses on this area, it's like that's the first thing I thought. I said, this is weird. I mean, for someone to try to ride their horse down in here, how in the world is this happening? That's what I thought at first, and then it kept coming, and as it got closer, it got louder, and it was just whatever it was more than just walking and crashing through stuff, breaking stuff, throwing stuff, just real loud, and of course by this time I've stopped fishing, and I'm kind of just in shock, just looking up in the woods, and whatever it is comes down the point towards the water, and he's getting light, and by then it's real loud, and whatever it is, I could it's real angry, and it's just thrashing around, crashing around, and then I can see it's one of those situations where the sun, all you can see is just shadows, so it never comes to the water's edge where I can see it, but it just stays back. I can see some movement, and it just goes up and around the shoreline, and crashing and stomping and making all kinds of noise. And about that time, I'm thinking I'm too close to the shore. And so I reached down to hit my trolling motor and to back me off the bank. And when I do, I think that's when he heard the motor go off, and that's when he saw me. He knew, figured out I wasn't, I was on the water. And basically after that, and I'm just kind of drifting back slowly, I heard like three almost like sighs or humps. I've done it before. It's like a hum, and I heard three of those, and then whatever it was walked back up in the woods, but instead of going crazy and breaking stuff, it just a bipedal crunch, just very calmly, slowly walked back up in the woods, and that was it. So that's what got me curious. Of course, I'm sitting there and like, what in the world is just what in the world? This is crazy. And so, but that was the thing that got my curiosity, and I knew where the area was. And so next weekend, like a dummy, I said, it just kept gnawing at me, and I said, I got to figure out what did that. I knew it wasn't a horse, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, surely God, this is not a Bigfoot. But I went to the area, and I took an old Sony camera I had, and I went in there and started just knocking around and researching, trying to figure it out. And that's kind of how I started down the rabbit hole.
Well, I know you researched for quite a while. What, 8, 9 years?
Yeah.
You did your due diligence.
Yeah.
And if anybody if you haven't gone and subscribed to Scott Carpenter on YouTube, go do that and go check out. I'm sure most of the people here have already, but you kind of slowed down with putting the videos out, but you didn't really stop. And what we were talking about the other day is you've gone past the point of trying to show this creature to anybody, or try to prove anything to yourself, or prove anything to anybody else. You've kind of gone past that point, and we feel exactly the same way. There's no, this being real is not even a discussion anymore. We're past that part. But what you have done is taken your knowledge and your experience, and you've been helping other people. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, as
Sure.
much as you want to give away anyway?
Yeah. I actually started a little blog or a website called the Sasquatch Awareness Project, where I've posted, it's kind of geared to that person that really, has a Sasquatch experience, and then doesn't know where to turn. And so, and it answers, it answers the question, what is it, and what did I see, and all kinds. It's got all kinds of good information in there about how to handle it, and what to do, and you don't need to be afraid, and all just all my experiences, and and information that I have concerning the creature there, and it's meant to help people. Plus, I've got they can email me, and I've got some other resources I put out there for people, for them to contact. And and like you said, that's my new focus. Like I showed you, how many hundreds of footprints do we need? How many hair samples do we need? How many DNA samples do we need? To me, when the DNA study came out and was finished, and pretty much. I mean, I didn't know what else is there to research. I mean, these beings are not, they don't want to interact with us. Okay, they don't, not in the way we think they should. And so this is not some indigenous lost tribe in South America that we discover, and you can send a anthropologist down there and live with them and learn their habits. They don't want that. Period. They don't want us to do that. And why, I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I mean, They won't even. I mean, they seldom will even talk with people. Very seldom. And so there's nothing left to do, so to speak, in research as far as that goes. And I found that there was a big need to assist people. I mean, I guess just because of my upbringing and the fact that I'd been exposed to these things, and it was more of a gradual, in other words, as an adult, the first time I had an experience, it's probably a good thing I didn't see it, but I heard it. And then I made eye contact with a couple and seen 3, 4, actually, if you count the one on top of the hill. And so, so by the time I actually made eye contact with one, I was already acclimated. I knew they were real, et cetera. It's just, fine. But, you have people, professionals, those people who have no interest in Bigfoot, hikers or people that just seldom go outdoors, and they have an experience with these things, and it's life altering. I mean, it totally messes them up. People, have the nightmare thing. They question reality. Some people, Les Stroud, after he got Mindspoke, admitted he went to a psychologist to say, "Am I crazy?" I mean, and so, people it just really affects people. And really since probably 2012, 13, people have been reaching out. They'll find Dave Pilates' site, a research partner, Nabs, and they'll send him an email and ask, hey, I've had this experience. Can someone help me? And if the person was in my area of the country, Dave would send me the email and say, can you reach out to this person? They're in need of help. So along the way, I've been helping those who needed help, and it just kind of snowballed. It seemed like that more and more people were needing help. More and more people are seeing these things, or it's becoming, I guess, it's been kind of normalized, even though in a tongue-in-cheek way with the Finding Bigfoot stuff and all that. But it got people to think about it and talk about it, and then that kind of like opened the floodgates, because then those people who would never say anything were not as afraid, and they began seeking out. Hey, I've had these experiences. Is there someone out there that can help me? Right. So that's kind of where I'm focusing now.
I give a lot of that credit to Wes Germer. Once his podcast came out in 2012, and then people started listening to other people's stories, I think it got them to more people to obviously come out with theirs. And you're absolutely 100% right. I call it the sudden moment of realization, where you're completely and totally oblivious, you're unaware, it's off your radar, and then boom, there it is. And I don't believe that emotionally we're prepared or equipped to handle it.
No.
And so you try to hold it down, and it just wants to come out, and it ends up ruining you. I mean, you can't do anything anymore. You have the nightmares, the bad dreams. And that's why we're so adamant about awareness and pushing awareness. And whether you believe or not, just be aware that strange thing that you hear in the woods could be one of these creatures. That way you're at least a modicum of preparedness, is upon you if it steps out on you. That's what we push. That's why we do what we do. And I couldn't do the research, but there's a man, you don't have to say his name or anything, or you don't have to talk about him at all, but tell people about the man and the stuff he's got going on around his house that you've helped here recently.
Sure. There's a rancher in Colorado that's bland enough, and we'll call him Jim. That's not his name, but he contacted me through Steve Isdahl, and Steve sent the email and said, can you help this guy? I mean, this guy's having some trouble. And because Steve's like, I don't know, this is something I've never, had to deal with before. And basically, he's a rancher on a large ranch, cattle. It's a working cattle ranch in Colorado, and he also does hunting guides for hunting to make a little extra money. And he, about a year and a half ago, these things began to show up on his property and do things, and then it kind of reached a crescendo during hunting season. He lost a client. I told you that one of the things he told me was the first time it became evident they were going up a trail, kind of up a draw, and there was thick brush and woods on the right hand side of the trail, and a boulder about the size of a basketball in an arc came flying out and landed in the front of the lead horse. And Jim got down and tried to and push the ball. He couldn't even pick it up; it was so heavy. And he got back on his horse, and the guy he was guiding said, "I'm done." He said, "I don't know what's out here, but he said if it can throw a boulder that size, with that kind of ease, I don't know. I'm done. Take me back." So he lost that guy totally. And then about 2 weeks later, they were mule deer hunting, and they had been glassing some mule deer. He said about 200 or 300 yards away in like a scrub thicket, small cedar type of area. And all of a sudden, they just, with no explanation, the little herd of mule deers busted out, took off running. And usually when that happens, someone's jumped them, and it usually means he's got a trespasser or someone's hunting, doesn't realize where they're at. And so he's told his hunter, he said, "You stay here. I'm going to go over here and talk to these people and see what's going on." Well, he rode over there, got off his horse, had his gun with him. As he entered the thicket, he saw the back end of a Sasquatch going, away from him out up the hill. And then that's kind of when he's like, "I need some help here because I can't have these things are running my hunters off, And then when I contacted him, I just felt there was, there's sometimes the Lord just puts things on your heart. And I read this guy's story, and we interacted with some emails, and I just thought, boy, something's going on here. I probably need to talk to this guy on the phone. So I just kind of expressed to him, "If you want to, I'll talk to you on the phone." And he said, "Sure." And we talked for about an hour, and pretty much I went through the list because he didn't know what a Bigfoot was. He didn't know what he was dealing with. So I just kind of went through the attributes and what they do. And for him, it's like we were ticking a list off. Yeah, they did that. Yeah, they did that. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, that's happened, And so, based on our discussion, he's been having stuff go on, but it's gotten, I usually do when it gets this bad, I recommend prayer and rebuking. And then we also do other things, the physical things, we put up the trail cameras and put the motion sensor lights up and those sort of things. And 98.9% of the time, all that works. They'll stay back. Yeah, they usually work, but this is one of those cases where it didn't. And apparently, earlier in the thing, they had actually punched a hole in the side of the house, and that's what kind of prompted doing all this. And then he's been hard to get a hold of because he's right in the middle of they're doing stuff with the ranch and the cattle. But basically, he told me that all 12 trail cameras were smashed. All the motion sensor lights were ripped down off the eaves of his house. They stole about half his chickens. But they didn't tear into the chicken coop. They just opened it and walked in. They got into the barn, took a goat, which, I know they love goats. So, and then they've been chunking firewood, cut firewood and rocks at the side of the house, which is, to me, a dual-edged sword. Before, they were coming to the house and punching it. Now they're throwing stuff at it. So maybe it's worked a little bit. But still, and whenever he has to make trips, he has to leave to deliver cattle and do stuff like that. So he's gone 2 or 3 days, and his girlfriend's living at the house. And as soon as he leaves, they start going crazy on her. And then when he comes back, the activity calms down. So, this is probably, everything that could possibly go wrong when people, encounter a Sasquatch on their property. And it's an untold story. Who's he going to call? He can't call the police. If he calls the wildlife, whatever, the Colorado wildlife, they're just going to, I'm sure they're aware they exist, but at the end of the day, they're just going to tell, hey, there's nothing we can do.
If they're not aware, they're not very good at their job.
I mean, he's ready to shoot them. I mean, he's a big game hunter. and he was loading some literally elephant rounds. He's got an elephant gun. He actually been on safari in Africa, so he has the gun. It's a 500 or 545. I don't even know. I hunt, but those sort of calibers.
Right.
He's ready for bear. And I just told him, I said, of course, if they endanger you, feel free to protect yourself, but I just wouldn't go popping off at one just because he's running around your property, because you hit one or kill one, you've got the other 10 to worry about,
Or more.
or more.
Yeah.
And I've, we don't know what happens in those cases because the people never come back. So, I've been praying, and several other people I know have prayed for him. And so, the last word is, things were quiet for the last 2 or 3 days, and, he's real busy, but he hasn't sent me an email saying, they're going crazy again. So I'm hopeful that, we can at least get where they can, I told him this was a situation where you're dealing with an indigenous people who live here, and they're, 8 foot tall and 900 pounds, and our laws and your rules and your property rights, they just don't care.
Right.
And so, it's a difficult thing to deal with,
Well, to me, it's just more validation that these beings, it's almost like like OCD. They don't want to be seen, because he's lived here all this time and had, completely oblivious, unaware. They've probably been around. Obviously, they've been around, but he hasn't been messed with. Nothing bad goes on. Now he becomes aware, and now they know he knows.
Yeah.
It seems like every time that happens, they don't care anymore.
Yeah.
It's just like they're upset that now that you found out.
Yeah.
And so they start doing all this stuff. And then that's just the way it seems. I'm not saying that's how it is, but you hear it time after time after time. It's just.
What's interesting is you've said just earlier that they don't want anything to do with us. And yet here they are, deliberately coming on people's property. And I know people are saying, well, it's their land, but I'm sure these ranches have been there for years. And I'm sure quite widespread as well, with a lot of land around them. So it's not as if they really desperate for that goat or that chicken. There must be other food about. So, there's something else to this.
Yeah.
Do you think a gang of rogue ones or individual ones, or what do you think's behind it? Maybe
I don't. That's a good question, and that's what we don't know. I mean, like I tell everybody, you got to switch your head around and think they're people just like we are. They have intellect, will, emotion. They have their own set of customs and their rules that they go by. So when we encounter them, it's kind of like we're butting into a situation that we may not even be a part of, other than the fact that we just stumbled upon it. And, I get asked that all the time, well, why? And I'm like, I don't know. When you see some crazy man go rob a store, I don't know why, and I said, it's the same thing with them. But we see this a lot. Like he said, it seems that they want to hide from you until you become aware. And then but here's the thing, they still won't show themselves. That's the thing. I mean, that's why you put up the trail cameras and stuff, because they're very, they're not going to get their picture taken. Of course, now he says they smashed them. I'd like to know how they smashed them. They may have crawled up to him or whatever, but they're still, it's just like what started happening is you'll see the signs that they were there, but you won't see them. Or usually the only people that do see them are females or children, because his niece has already seen it once. And of course his girlfriend is getting the royal treatment, but when he's there, they won't, what I'm saying? They calm down. But as soon as he leaves, then they start throwing stuff, making noises, stealing things, and taking the chickens and all that. It's not like they always, it's hard to explain. They always do just enough that they did it. But anyone else you tell, say, you're a lunatic. No, there's no, this was just a coincidence. They know that's what they do. I mean, just like the chickens were missing, right? But the chicken coop has a latch and a lock on it. And so obviously they can get in and do that. But you tell anybody else, well, the fox or whatever got in there and got them. Of course, they know a fox didn't do that, or a possum, because, they scatter the body, they kill them and eat them, and they leave half the, a possum or a fox will kill every one of them and not eat them, just kill them because he can.
Definitely be a scene.
Yeah. I mean, basically, literally, these are just missing. They're gone. Like somebody walked in, took them, and left. Same thing with the goat. He was in the barn in a locked stall, and something went in, and took him.
You said that they like goats. How made you say that? Is it a well-known
goats is a deer? It's just like a deer. Same thing.
Well, Janice Carter in her book, and with Mary Green in the book 50 Years of Bigfoot in Tennessee, right. She talked about even and this group were friends. They were they had a close personal relationship with this family of Sasquatch, and she complained that she never could keep goats. That they would beg them, don't kill our goats, they're our pets, and they just couldn't. It's in her book. They just couldn't help themselves, and they would kill the goat and eat it. And and they were these people, they were friends, and even the grandfather and the one called Fox even told each other they loved each other, but they just couldn't, the family group just couldn't keep their mitts off those goats. Well, so that's why I said that. It seems that
you hear stories or accounts. You hear accounts, and there was something Ron Moorhead said on here, and I agree with him 100% that they're not all the same. And it appears that some have moral culpability and some don't.
Exactly.
That they have this ability to control themselves when it comes to us, but then some don't. So I'm wondering if we can make a real staunch comparison to ourselves with these creatures. That they've got this, that they're self-aware like we are, sentient, self-aware, able to be able to say, what is this all about? Most every animal in the world, as far as we know, don't have that. I believe they have that, and I believe that their life experience is what determines how they act and how they behave, just like us.
Yeah, I at first I thought, I come from the side that believes they're Nephilim, and I thought, well, because of that, they were all inherently evil. But as I've learned and both experienced in other people, and I've done some more Bible study, I think they have free will. They can exercise free will. Now, not all of them choose, to do good, just like human beings. But I think because you do have, the cases where, one will help a child, one will, help a person out, they'll not, there's a case where a guy he was being stalked by a mountain lion, and literally he turns around, the mountain lion's getting ready to pounce, and a Sasquatch grabs the mountain lion, breaks its back, and kills it and saves his life. So, how do you square that within the one that, chases a woman and, and does lewd things, or one that, is terrorizing and killing animals? And so, it's like you say, it's just, they're just like us, and they all have a unique, or unique people or unique individuals. How's that? Yeah. And I think you have, they've interbred, and you have some that are, I think more, however pure you want to call it, and some have crossed more with human beings. So there's there's differences. I think that some abilities, we talk about all these abilities, and I think that, that their abilities vary. I think that it's borne out in the record. I mean, one will get hit by Granny's car and get killed, and the other one will be chased into a ravine and cloak and disappear. How do you square that? One can, one can't. Well, of course, it's just like human beings. Some of us can sing really well. Some of us can run really fast. Some of us, are big and muscular. Some of them are skinny and weak. It's all genetics. And I think the same is my, opinion or theory, that it's the same thing with the Sasquatch. Depending on their genetics, it kind of, some could have more of these supernatural or special abilities, while others have less, and so it's not always, what I'm saying? It's not always cut and dry. Some have conical heads and look apish. Some look just like human beings with a little extra hair. So it just depends on the individual that you're encountering.
How do you feel about the, this place that is getting attacked by them? So you don't know for sure that they are Bigfoot. And what I'm saying is, when you listen to a lot of the Dogman accounts, the Dogman is purposely wanting to cause fear and cause havoc. So is there a possibility it could be Dogmen that are coming on this property? And what do you feel about the fact that stories of Bigfoot and Dogmen are completely different in the terms of personality and what they tend to do?
Yeah. There could be Dogmen coming on. He hasn't really seen physically. He hasn't seen one. Like his niece saw what she called a bear walking on two legs. So, and I don't know. I don't think he's found any footprints. So I agree. It could be these could be Dogmen since they're so aggressive. And the Dogman. Having encounters with them like I have, it seems like if you do Bigfoot research, the Dogman eventually shows up, even if you don't or not looking for him. And as far I've not had enough experience other than the two things. I know just the fact that the way they look and the way the one I had made eye contact with, looked right through me, that I didn't feel the same. I made eye contact with Bigfoot and I felt like I was looking at a person. Someone who had a soul. When I looked at the Dogman, none of that was there. In fact, the look was it wasn't even like an animal. I was looking at an animal. It's hard to describe that look when something looks right through you, like you're not even there. You don't matter. They don't care. They're totally, oblivious almost. It's, and there's no feeling in those eyes. They're dead cold eyes. It's like looking at a set of glass eyes. If you're looking at a mounted animal with glass eyes, that's exactly. So, these Dogman creatures I think they're more animal than they are human. And Dr. Ketchum has run some DNA on them, and there's canine and there's human in there, and I think there's a couple other things in there too. So it's kind of a some sort of hybrid, genetically engineered or whatever. They may but they're different. A lot of people say, well, I'd shoot one of them in a heartbeat, and I don't know if I'd blame them or not. But they can be very fierce,
Well, however they came to be, it doesn't seem to be natural.
No, I don't think so. I mean,
all right. Well, we're going to take just a minute. Wow, 353 people watching. That's incredible. That's a great show. We want to take a minute for those of you watching. If you're on your phone, hit that little X down there and go over there. You'll see a button looks like this. It's probably going to look like this. So hit that thumbs up button for us. And we just want to let everybody know what we got in the works. Some things that are coming up. Bigfoot Odyssey's researchers report is backing down. We're going to take it to 1 day, but we're adding 2 things. So just not here. Daniela is starting her channel. It's going to be pretty much a talk show format like this, right? And what's the name of it?
Hidden Existence.
Hidden Existence. So that covers a lot of things. And myself and Mark Zaski are starting a podcast, going to be available on Patreon. We've already got everything set up. We're about to start recording. It's called Mark and Kerry, A to Z. And it's just going to be us letting it all hang out. We're talking about everything under the sun, mostly fringe subjects, but we're going to show a lot of videos and talk about those and talk about our experiences with Bigfoot. A lot of it's going to be Bigfoot. And we've got a lot of segments that are going to be in there. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And we'll let you know where you can find it. It's going to be the Patreon is Mark and Kerry, A to Z. And so that's what we got coming up. But we're going to take the research report to Wednesdays only. And then I think, Daniela, you're going to do your show on Saturday early during the day, right? For us.
Yeah, but we're not doing this just yet, are we? We're not cutting down.
No. That's what I said.
Yeah. Well,
just kind of announcing it.
Don't worry, people. They're going, oh my God, no, don't cut down to 1 day. We're going to do it over the next few weeks. So
nothing. It's not going to be quick. As soon as Daniela gets to 1,000 subscribers, we're going to back up on the Bigfoot Odyssey Researchers Report to 1 day a week, and then we'll have our show. Mark and I will have our other show. So you're losing one, but you're getting 2 more. So that's And I mean, we may do a Saturday every now and then. It's going to be too much. It's going to be too much on me unless Daniela just wants to do this by herself. And that wouldn't bother me at all. So we'll see. That's what we decided on for now, but things could change. We're going to start taking your questions for Scott Carpenter. If you don't mind, put those all in caps for us, please. It makes it a lot easier for us to pick out, if you don't mind.
Someone asked one a bit earlier about, actually, can we just before questions, Scott, I want to ask you about the infrasound.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the same symptoms every time, or can they be different?
I found they can be different because a different frequency will have a different effect on you. And so I've found that, it's different every time. I mean, there are some common things, from the ringing of the ears to the confusion, to the mild headaches. That seems to be, for me, when I get hit with it, I always get the ringing in the ears. And I always, sometimes my eyes will water and I'll get that confused feeling. And then sometimes they hit you with a frequency that triggers the fight or flight. They can, basically, if you study infrasound, and the military uses it for their, non-lethal weapons, depending on the frequency they hit you with, they can make you pass out. They can make you hallucinate. They can implant thoughts in your head. I mean, there's a lot of things, if you know how to manipulate infrasound, they can do. So it's kind of a scary ability, to know that, missing time. I've had a couple instances of missing time, when I, lost about 10 minutes, had wiped my memory, had no idea. So, it's you know what I'm saying? It's usually the same symptoms, but they can do all kinds of things with it. It's very interesting. If you ever want to do a deep dive infrasound, something, if you look at, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah,
that is for sure. Right quick, we have a $10 super chat from Arwin. Thank you so much for that. He says, for the next episode. We appreciate that. Thank you, Arwin.
Thank you. And also, what about Mindspeak for you, Scott? Have you experienced anything like that?
They have attempted to Mindspeak me, and I have not allowed it. I don't feel comfortable allowing, I've gotten some really bad headaches and some really weird nightmares, and it's almost like I can feel like someone wanting to press in, and I just won't allow it. Now, I know Les Stroud, he was Mindspoke when he came and did his show. I know of other people that have them on their property that speak to them regularly, through the Mindspeak. That's how they choose to do it. So yeah, I think it's a real thing, and they can do it. I personally don't feel comfortable doing it. Other people do, and that's fine. Just be careful, because, when you let someone else into your head, that's just, to me, that could be dangerous. What if they could implant a thought, you need to kick your shoes off and need to take your pants and your belt off and lay down, and I'm going to come grab you, because everybody, the missing 411 deal,
So I wonder if some people are more susceptible than others, almost like a hypnotist.
Yes, exactly.
The work of people who are susceptible and those that have got free will and won't, fall for it. Someone asked earlier, what size was that handprint that you found on your truck a long time ago?
I'd say about, because the window, the little strip window was probably about 12 inches high, and it covered the bottom of the palm all the way to the top. So from the palm to the top of the middle finger was at least 12 inches. Okay. So if that gives you an idea how big it was.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good size hand.
Here's one from Brown Dwarf right here. That's a huge hand. It says, does Scott have an opinion on the 411 phenomena? If you want to touch on that for just a minute.
Sure, I have an opinion. I actually think there's maybe more than one thing causing this. Okay, could Sasquatch be taken, or other cryptids? There's more than even alien abduction. Could that phenomenon be part of it? Yes. I mean, Dave Pilates, he did a one-off show on the History Channel where he pretty much put out a theory that one of the guys that went missing could have encountered some sort of electromagnetic discharge, related to boulder fields. And, they actually found a time dilation, in the ruins, in the Pueblo ruins. So, he kind of, that's the only time he's ever come forward and said this, in this one isolated case, it could have been, basically this poor guy, basically what it was is him and his partner were out in almost an open boulder field, kind of, open area. The guy turns around, looks away for a second, turns back around. The guy's gone, like gone. He has, there's no time for him to run and go anywhere, and, if there was some sort of electromagnetic thing, like a portal or something opened up and the guy got sucked in, or, even worse, if there's an electromagnetic discharge and you happen to be at the wrong place at the right time, guess what? You're gone. You're just done. You're literally vaporized. So, that's another, so those are my opinions. I think it's very complicated. And I think there are similarities in David's case files, but I don't know. I'm not, it almost seems like there's something going on, that it's multiple things doing it. I just don't think I don't think you can say, oh, it's, UFOs. Oh, it's portals opening up. Oh, it's Sasquatch. Oh, it's Dogman. I think it's a combination. That's my opinion.
I just want to let everybody know that we're not, if we miss your question, it's not intentional. We're not intentionally skipping over your question. It's just some of the questions that are more relevant to the discussion are the ones that we throw up there first. Let's see. Here's one from Xena Kate. Do you think these creatures could be a manifestation from the demonic realm?
Well, I think they are related to the demonic realm. Yes. I think they're Nephilim. I'll just give a real short thing. What a Nephilim is the angels came down and they took women and they had sex as we know it, however they did it, and they produced offspring, a human angel hybrid. That the word the Bible used for them was Nephilim, to fall. The fallen ones earthbound, because they weren't, and they didn't have a divine soul, because angels mated with them and created them. So, they had, this came outside the human bloodline. And so then, basically, when the Nephilim died in the book of Enoch, they were cursed. So their souls couldn't go to hell or heaven. And the curse was that they were to roam the world, without a body. They were demons. That's where your demons came from. Now, that's the biblical explanation of where demons come from. So, yes, a living Sasquatch, and their Nephilim, as I think, they do, while they're not demons, they can definitely be influenced by demons and or fallen angels. There's two different entities. A fallen angel is not a demon. Right. So I know people are like, whoa, I didn't come here for a Bible lesson. But to answer your question, it's the demonic.
And we don't shy away from any of it. Whatever is a part of this, whatever people think, whatever people believe, that's what we're going to bring to the people that are looking into the Bigfoot subject. It's because we just don't know. No. And that's it. You could be 100% right. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're not. Yeah. We all have our own beliefs. Yeah. And I tend to start leaning a lot more toward the energy, spiritual, something's going on here. Whether that's Bigfoot or not, I don't know. I know a lot of things get married to Bigfoot sometimes that shouldn't be, because you talk about other cryptids also. And it could be that we're not able to sit down with them and study them. And if somebody is, and you're not recording it, bringing it to us, I'm not going to say what you are. Sorry. Here's another one. Let's see. This is Anna Sisik with the Mindspeak. Is it the person's voice or the voice of the Squatch? Have you heard people tell you, hey, I heard this voice in my head? Did it sound like my own voice, or was it someone else's?
Les said that it was a voice in his head, but he said, I knew it wasn't my voice. But, it wasn't like, in other words, when you think to yourself, you hear that voice. So the way he described it, it was that voice that you hear yourself say to yourself in your head. But he said, it wasn't me. That wasn't me speaking to me. And that's what I've heard other people say. They hear the voice in their head, but they know intrinsically those aren't my thoughts. That's not the way I think. That's not what I would say. Because, even when you think to yourself, you have a certain way of doing it.
Sure.
So that's like I said, I wouldn't let them mind speak me, so I can't speak. But that's what Les and a couple other people I know have said.
Yeah, here's well, I'm sorry. You're the producer. I don't know why I'm doing this. No, I will do that one next. This is kind of relative and really important. This is Rachel Gotro. Just mind your business. Have you seen or heard orbs or myth?
I personally have experienced orbs one time. Other people, of course, have taken pictures and seen them. My experience with orbs was I couldn't see them. I was basically on my back porch, probably 2012, 13-ish. It was in the evening. I was just chilling out. It wasn't dark yet, but it was getting dark, and my motion sensor light came on the corner of the house, and it's kind of odd because it really wasn't dark enough yet. And then I just felt like something was around me. I felt the presence of something. Of course, I had my cell phone with me, and being in this deal for so long, I immediately just started taking pictures. I did a complete 360 all the way around me. Okay, and I did it just really, boom, boom, boom. And then when I went back and started, scrolling back through the pictures, I caught orbs, and it was weird. I mean, I've got the picture, the orb pictures on the book and on my online. You can go see them, but it's like they were balls about that big, and they were like going through a conduit. And at first it's like, well, maybe that's just lens flare, or something. But then the third picture there were three of them, and all of them going different directions. One they crossed, and one went up, one went out, one went down. And so, very odd, but I didn't see them. I just took a picture, and then they were visible. And about 6 months after that, I got the same feeling and snapped a picture underneath the deck, and I caught another one, one of these orb things. And, I had a friend that was, at the time, it was a professional photographer. It's what he did. I seen the pictures with all the metadata, and he says, I can tell you that this is not a lens flare. He said, I'm not prepared to tell you what it is, but he said, based on his professional opinion, you caught something physical that could, that manifested that you could take a picture of. But he said, that's all I can tell you. Because especially the last one, when you had him go three different directions, he's like, if you're getting lens flare and you're getting a streak, it's always going to be that one direction. And, you don't get them. There's no way the camera could, double, triple expose and do that. He said, that's not how that camera works. So there was something there.
Yeah.
And I've heard of other people, Richard Hucklebridge, in California, they had like the Sasquatch will be walking, and they'll be like little, softball or baseball sized orbs, like circling their heads, like orbiting, like the Sasquatch are controlling them.
Wow.
And can you imagine? That'd be wild looking, coming through the woods, but people have described that.
Heard a lot of orb stories.
Absolutely. Yeah, orbs and lights.
From Marianne.
Peter Sparrow has had one follow her home in December and had a wave of guilt come over her. Have you heard of anyone having those symptoms or heard of anyone having them follow them home?
I think that's probably make you feel that, huh?
Oh, yeah. Well, following researchers' homes like Bigfoot Research 101, that's what I tell everybody who wants to get into this. If you do this long enough, they will follow you home. It's like ghost hunting. If you do it long enough, a ghost, some spirit or whatever it is, demonic, it's going to attach to you. And the Sasquatch is the same way. I will say unequivocally, they will follow you home. You do it seriously and you seek them out after, 18 months, 2 years, maybe 3 years, then they're going to follow you home. Follow me home. And I've got multiple people, they follow them home. And I don't know about the guilt feeling. I don't know. Maybe, this thing was, trying to impress something upon her. I don't know. I didn't feel guilt. I felt scared and freaked out and trying to figure out how in the world they found my house,
That is a question, isn't it? Because I hear the same thing.
you think the military have studied a living Bigfoot forest being?
My personal opinion, yes. I'm pretty sure the Forest Service has known about them since the late 50s. The military, maybe even before that. There's just too many. I mean, we've got two. We had two different family members, one in Texas area and one in North Carolina area, contact us different years apart that their fathers were in Green Berets and units that went out and eradicated rogue groups of Sasquatch that went rogue, started cannibalism, and at different times. So yeah, they're more than aware of them, and I'm sure DARPA's had their mitts all over them, because if you look at some of the abilities they have, and since they're a physical and spiritual being, some of the things they can do, good and well, DARPA would like to get, or they already have, you talk about genetically engineering something as a super soldier. Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes too much sense that they know and are actively keeping it in the dark.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the frustration, and with a lot of people, I think, some people are aware of me that Steve Isdall, that's his pet peeve, is he doesn't really care. He's like, I know they exist. The problem is no one is being informed. They're suppressing it, and the public is just, I liken it to this. It's like, let's say a group of mountain lions begins to show up in an area, and the government and the federal authorities, because they don't want to lose the revenue, they don't tell people there are mountain lions in here, be prepared. Well, and then and they start this campaign that everybody that sees one, they make fun of them and tell them they're crazy. And then the occasional person that gets eaten by one, then they make up an excuse, well, that was really a rogue bear, or, that was something else. In other words, that's kind of what the situation with the Sasquatch is. That's what they're doing to us. They know they exist. They know probably more than we know about them as far as their physical attributes and what they can do, but they're not telling us. And anytime someone says, hey, I saw one, they squash it and they press it down. And then when, a group does go rogue, well, then they send in the military to eradicate them, and blame it on, a serial killer. Well, and to me, that's just infuriating,
It is. If there's anybody by now that doesn't know who Steve Isdall is, he has a channel on YouTube. It's called How to Hunt. He's a very stand-up, no nonsense kind of guy, and he tells some pretty good Bigfoot encounter stories, a lot of his own and some others. So you guys should really go check that out if you haven't checked out How to Hunt, and get to know who Steve Isdall is for sure.
Yeah.
Scott, have you seen any of the shimmering that some people have described when they see maybe a shimmering of something, maybe predator kind of effect of something there, but you can't see it, and then maybe it appears? Or
yeah, I've seen one. Well, I guess we call it cloaked.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a video of one cloaked, and then I saw one out of the corner of my eye and turn just long enough to see it walk through, and it was like the Predator, but it was better. You know what I'm saying? In the Predator movie, there was a whole lot less distortion, but right. There was just enough distortion that you knew something wasn't right. I mean, it was like, the foliage behind it was just barely, just, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, it wasn't like the Predator movie where, they did that so you could see it, but it was a whole lot better.
I think that would be enough for me,
Yeah, that was freaky. I just 2 or 3 seconds of it too, and it was gone.
Well, I mean, when you put that into the equation, I mean, what are your chances of seeing the thing or getting the picture at that point? I mean, you're pretty much on your own experience after that. There's no point in even taking a camera, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But hey, we've come to the end of our hour, Scott. We thank you so much for coming on here. The first show of the year. It's been great. Definitely would want to get you back on here real soon. I know you and Steve have some stuff in the works. I'd like to get both of you guys on here if possible, but if not, we'll always welcome you here anytime.
Sure. Well, when that ramps up, and I think it will here in the next couple months, I definitely love to come back on. And
y'all welcome, man. And you can find the links to Scott's channel and to Scott's book
In the description.
In the description.
Always like to do that so I can get
the truth tonight and the Nephilim among us.
That's right.
Oh, the updated version.
Shameless plug.
No, it's not shameless. That's what you're here for, is to push your stuff. We appreciate you coming on and doing this. And and then this Wednesday is Blue Line Wednesday, correct? Am I right?
I think so.
I think it is. It's going to be Blue Line Wednesday. If not, then we'll figure something out. But hey, we want your stories. So if you have a story and you want us to read it on Blue Line Wednesday, you can email us here at yourbfstory@gmail.com.
Oh, yeah.
If you'd like to be a guest on the show and talk about your encounter, your experiences, or you're a Bigfoot researcher, this is the Researcher's Report, or a UFO researcher or a ghost researcher, we'll have you on here and talk about that stuff. Not that one. That one. You can email us here at bigfootodyssey@gmail.com. We certainly do appreciate you coming on here tonight, Scott. Daniela.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Wonderful, as always. We'll see you guys Wednesday, 7:00 p.m. Central. Don't forget tonight, 9:00 p.m. Central, Paranormal Portal. Go check out what Brent and Don are doing. 2-hour special show tonight. So be sure you guys show up there for that, 7:00 Pacific.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a link to my new channel on Wednesday for people who are asking in the chat. We'll put a link up in the description.
Yes, people need to start subscribing to your channel so you can get that up and going.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Scott.
Good night.